With the PlayStation 5 Pro just around the corner, I couldn't help but wonder how it could potentially improve the gaming experience on some games that struggle a bit on the base PlayStation 5. And that's kind of what motivated me to put this video together. So what we're going to do is we're going to put together a PC that is somewhat equivalent to the PlayStation 5 Pro and test some games that struggle, like Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, Dragon's Dogma 2, and a few others, and a surprise. Before we check out the games though, let me just quickly go over the CPU and GPU that I've chosen. For a processor, I'll be using my Ryzen 3700X, which is a Zen 2 8-core 16-thread CPU, just like what's in the PlayStation 5 and the Pro. It can, however, boost higher than the PlayStation 5 and the Pro, although the Pro does get a frequency bump up to 3.8 GHz, I believe. The desktop also has more L3 cache and L2 cache, so it is a bit faster than what's on the PlayStation 5. But for the sake of this video, I think it should give us some insight. Now for the graphics card that I'll be using, let's start with the PlayStation 5 base. The RX 6700 non-XT is pretty much the PC equivalent of the PS5. Same exact amount of compute units, ROPs, TMUs, everything, right? Now, according to Mark Cerny, the PS5 Pro is up to 45% faster in GPU render, which would land it around 7700 XT and 6800 non-XT. What I'll be using is my RX 6800 XT. That's the GPU that I have that it's the closest. Now that is a little bit faster. A 6800 XT is actually very similar to a 7800 XT as well. But what I'll be doing is downclocking the 6800 XT to 2.3 gigahertz. Now the Pro should be a bit faster in ray tracing, hardware accelerated, but this isn't a ray tracing focused video anyway, and it's speculative and theoretical because there's still quite a bit we don't know about the PS5 Pro. But anyway, let's get into the games, shall we? We're going to begin with Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, and I'll be using Digital Foundry's clip here just to show you how the game runs on the PS5 and how GPU and CPU heavy it actually is.
That the game was pretty heavy both on the GPU and CPU, especially CPU side of things. All those swarming enemies and such, depending upon the scene you're in, can really lower the frame rate on a older CPU, especially below 60 FPS.
So yeah, guys, we saw drops as low as the 30s in this area, and we're gonna test out this area as well. So let's see what we can do with our hardware. Let's go ahead and start with the settings. I have quite a bit of experience benchmarking this game across a few different sets of hardware. Alex is right. This game is not only CPU heavy, but also GPU heavy. That's why we're going to start at native 1440p. And for graphical settings, I'm actually using Benchmark King's optimized PC settings. And I'll leave a link to his channel down below, and I'll put up the settings, recommended settings on screen so you guys can see them as well. And that'll be our base. Before we go on, give me just one more minute. I want to explain for those of you who may not understand how to read the performance metrics on the top left corner. At the very top where it says 6800 XT, that's our graphics card. The number to the right of that currently says 93%. That's how much of the graphics card is being utilized. Below that GPU core, that's the graphics card frequency. Below that, Ryzen 3700X is how much of our CPU is being utilized. Currently says 46%. Below that is our frame rate, FPS. So let's go ahead and continue forward and see what happens. When I saw Digital Foundry's video here, actually the PlayStation 5 could actually maintain 60 for the most part, but it would actually dip sometimes. Now here, I've left the frame rate unlocked for now. We're going to lock it in a little bit to test it out. But I just want to show you, right now we're actually being limited by our CPU. How do we know? Because the GPU is not consistently at 99%. It's not being fully utilized. And even though the CPU 3700X only says 45%, we are CPU bound because it's not able to max out the GPU. That's kind of rule of thumb. You can get a lot deeper than that, but the CPUs cannot be fully utilized at 99% by games in the same way as GPUs. So that's why we're dropping now, as a matter of fact. What I wanted to do though is set a 60 FPS limit, because that's how it would be set up on console anyway, and it's more fluid and consistent in my opinion. Now, on PCs, there's a few different ways you can cap your frame rate, but some games actually have an FPS limit setting in it. Like this game, for example, has an FPS limit, so we're going to set it to 60. But I have a feeling we're not going to be able to maintain a consistent 60. Let's check out some heavier areas. We are actually able to stay at 60 FPS locked pretty much almost all the time in this area, but it does drop a little bit like now whenever you get swarmed. So yeah, I don't suspect the PS5 Pro being able to deliver a consistent 60 FPS experience. For the most part, we are very close to 60. And if you play on a VRR display, which a lot of people, especially enthusiasts who would play on a Pro, would have a VRR display, I'm assuming, is you would not even notice drops to the mid and low 50s. Let's test out that problematic area that we saw in Digital Foundry's video. Let's go ahead and get this event started and see what happens. All right, guys, here we go. They're coming. Let's see what happens. Now, I should mention that another reason why I wanted to test this game was because if you watch Digital Foundry's video, they compared the PS5 with the Series X. And the Series X was actually much better, was running the game much better. It too would drop in some areas, but it was noticeably better than the PS5. And Series X and PS5 have a very similar CPU, so I was thinking, well, it has to be the PS5's GPU maybe contributing to it, or maybe it's an architectural thing or optimization thing, I don't know. But looking at it here, we are getting swarmed, and we have yet to drop below 50. I mean, we dropped to like 53 FPS for a split second, but this is doing a lot better than I thought. We're getting the second wave coming in now, guys. This is the real test. Huge swarms of enemies, and yeah, look at that, man. We're not dropping anywhere below 50. That's actually really good. Within the VRR range, you would not feel this at all. It would actually feel pretty smooth. Tell you what, though, we have GPU headroom, so why don't we test out 4K with dynamic resolution scale? Since we had some GPU power to spare, why not? And as you can see, display resolution is 2160p with dynamic resolution scale. We're still keeping the same exact graphical settings. The game looks great, guys. Let's see what happens. Well, 4K with dynamic resolution scale, it's still doing really, really good. We got a bunch of enemies coming, and yeah, we're still getting the very similar frame rate. So this is good news, man. I hope that the developers can provide a PlayStation 5 Pro mode. Worst case scenario, even if they didn't, the bigger GPU on the PS5 Pro should be able to lift up performance where the PS5 GPU can't. But anyway, enough of Space Marine 2. This is good news. Let's check out the next game. And next, we're going to take a look at Dragon's Dogma 2. And this is a clip from Digital Foundry's examination of the performance in the game. And as you can see, in the outdoor areas, ray tracing on or off, it can drop below 60, although a lot lower with ray tracing enabled. But Burnworth, like right here, it can drop into the 30s or 40s, ray tracing on or off. The game is insanely CPU limited, but there's been some updates. Well, a very big update very recently that I benchmarked on my channel on PC. Okay, so to get a feel for the game, I wanted to start with 4K native and drop into the game and see what's happening. We have ray tracing enabled, by the way, and the rest of the settings are pretty much on high and some medium. I've tweaked a few things that should help us out, but let's load into the game and see what's happening. Okay, so we've loaded into the game and we appear to be around 40 something FPS. We're actually right at the border of PlayStation 5's VRR range, actually. Funny enough, though, the PS5 was getting the same frame rate with ray tracing on this. Like if you look at this Digital Foundry clip here with ray tracing on, it's at around 45 FPS in the outdoor areas. But at the same time, we're running at native 4K. So let's go ahead and check out some FSR perhaps and see what happens. Let's try turning FSR to quality. So now we're upscaling from 1440p to 4K and see what happens. Okay, so far so good. We're at 60. Yeah, so we dropped to the low 50s, but it is better than it was previously. So FSR definitely helped. So you never know. I mean, the ray tracing capabilities of the PlayStation 5 Pro should outdo my 6800 XT, at least by the sounds of it, right? I mean, Mark Cerny said that the PS5 Pro will be 2 times up to 3 times faster in ray calculations over the PS5. Now, I don't really know what to make of that, if I'm being honest. So I think we're going to have to test the PS5 Pro to kind of get an idea. But I still feel that this is a bit too much for my graphics card, but I also am seeing some CPU limitations. I think it might be wiser to just target 1440p and make our way to Vernworth City, because that's going to be the real test of our CPU. All right, I've set the resolution to 1440p and also disabled ray tracing. So let's jump into the game and see what happens. And here we go, guys. We're at 60 FPS with a 60 FPS frame rate lock, and we have GPU resources to spare, actually, so that's good. But let's see how we do once we enter the city of Vernworth, because that's a problematic area. And to be fair, the 3700X is not really that great of a gaming CPU anymore. I mean, it really wasn't when it came out either. It was good. It was a decent CPU, but this game is very CPU heavy. Now, there is some further optimizations they could potentially do on console. I don't know, but like Sony first party, for example, like with Spider-Man, uses ray tracing on the PS5, and it's pretty much locked at 60 in its performance RT mode. But on PC, it actually uses a lot more CPU resources than on console. So there is certain functions and things that can offload to the more specialized hardware on the PS5, for example. And PS5 uses a different API as well. So, you know, it's not like an apples to apples that we're comparing here either. Now, we did hit up a hitch right then and there. We dropped to 38 FPS for a split second. But for the most part, we are doing way better than what Digital Foundry showed in Vernworth on the PS5. Ray tracing on or off, they were dropping into the 30s. At least here, we are within the VRR range. Although those spikes, those hitches, VRR is not going to help with that. You're definitely going to feel that. But it's actually doing way better than it did prior to the patch. I remember checking this game out months ago. It was a disaster in Vernworth. Even with my 7800 X3D, it was a disaster. But this is actually good. I mean, it shows improvement that it would run better. Now, I remain curious if the rumor about Dragon's Dogma 2 running at 60 FPS on the PS5 Pro, I remain curious about that. If it's true, it'll be hella impressive that it can do it and I can't get it to lock at 60 on the 3700X. Because here, my GPU is not the problem. This is all CPU bound. We're only using 40%, 40 to 50% of the GPU. So this was interesting. But anyway, let's move on to the next game. Next, we're going to take a look at RoboCop Rogue City, a very recent Unreal Engine 5 game. And this is Digital Foundry's breakdown of the game, how it runs on console.
Series X resolves to about a 1440p final resolution, and that applies to both modes. Internally, it's at a 1080p resolution in both modes as well, with the possibility of dynamic resolution scaling. PS5 seems to mostly be a match for Series X and looks about the same in head-to-head shots.
So we're basically dealing with a 1440p resolution mode for quality, it sounds like, and 1080p internal render with potential dynamic resolution scaling. Now, as far as the performance,
with similar dips in typical play, that means a fairly stable quality mode with a more difficult run of play in the performance mode. I did, however, notice that the PS5 suffered from some pretty significant frame rate dips in open world traversal in this downtown area that weren't present on Series X.
So apparently Oliver from Digital Foundry couldn't get a locked 60 in the more like open city areas, and that's what we're going to test. Now what I wanted to start with here is I wanted to target 4K because I think that's going to be the goal of the PS5 Pro primarily. But for resolution scale, I've gone with 58%, so that is actually 1252p. And then upscaling to 4K using the Unreal Engine's temporal super resolution technology. So that actually does a really good job. FSR sucks in this game, so we're not going to touch it. Now for the settings, I've gone with them mostly high, and we're also using lumen reflections as well. So let's check it out. And here we are, guys. We just started a brand new game, so we can check out the city. We saw drops into the 50s sometimes in the city areas. Now we're going to check out Detroit a bit later on as well. But one thing I didn't show you guys is that during combat, there was performance drops as well, but also during cutscenes. This game actually has very demanding cutscenes, and I've tested this on very high-end hardware. But I don't have a problem with that because a cutscene's a cutscene. What matters most is the gameplay. But I'll show you an example of a cutscene anyway.
Thank God you've come! This lady really needs to see a doctor!
Murphy, these people need help. Why don't you go ahead?
As you saw there, guys, we dropped into the 40s. So this is one of the worst cutscenes as far as performance drop goes. Most of them were actually at 60, maybe 50 sometimes. But we can take a look at a bit of combat here because there's a lot of particles and stuff flying. And I was actually able to stay at 60 FPS pretty much locked without much issue. I mean, sometimes you can drop to the mid 50s maybe. But there's also other areas like this one here, which is later on in the level, that it can actually drop a bit below 60 in some cases. So it kind of all depends on what's happening. And usually Unreal Engine 5 games aren't normally very CPU heavy, but this one actually can be sometimes. The next part I was very curious about was the police station, because on that same Digital Foundry video, they actually showed Xbox in this area. It was dropping into like the 40s, I believe, for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but as you can see here in the police station, during gameplay, we are not locked at 60 exactly, but we're pretty dang close to it. So again, we see very high GPU utilization. But for the most part, I mean, it actually feels pretty good. Now, one area I was actually also curious about was once we leave the police station and go to Detroit, where the game kind of opens up. That's where the PS5 was dropping below 60 consistently. So let's check that out, and then we can move on to the next game. Well, let's get in our vehicle and check out Detroit, baby. Now you might be saying, well, you know, you're rendering from like 58% of 4K. Well, this game is a very demanding game. I mean, don't expect to see native 4K with newer games, even on a PS5 Pro. I've actually benchmarked this game before on two very high-end graphics cards, RTX 4090 and RX 7900 XTX, which is the best of both AMD and NVIDIA. 4090 is really the only card that can run this game at native 4K with all settings maxed out. And even it can drop below 60 in some cases. So this is a very demanding game, but I have to tell you, man, it looks great. I'm playing it on my LG OLED TV, and I mean, it looks fantastic. As you can see here, this is high detail. You can even see the threads on that guy's coat. It looks great. And here we are in Detroit. And hey, kitty, we're at 60 FPS. I mean, the newer AAA games, especially Unreal Engine 5 ones, stand to gain massively by the PlayStation 5 Pro's bigger GPU. Absolutely. I mean, I've tested a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games. They can be quite GPU heavy. Now, there very well could be some parts of the game that would drop massively, but at least the areas that Digital Foundry looked at, that I have tested here, there is a very noticeable improvement, which is kind of the goal of this video. But yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next game. Now for my last game, and my surprise game, is Starfield. Yeah, I know, Starfield's not on PlayStation, and this might anger some people, but I have a feeling that it's a matter of time before it comes to Sony PlayStation, and I wanted to take this opportunity to see how it could potentially run on a PlayStation 5 Pro. But let's listen to Oliver of Digital Foundry tell us what settings are being used on console.
The visuals mode comes in at a 1440p pixel count, while the performance mode clocks in at 900p, and both appear to use VRS as well. I didn't spot any dynamic resolution in my testing, though Bethesda does mention it as a possibility. I believe both modes are upscaling to 4K or close to 4K using FSR2 here.
Alrighty then, so performance mode clocks in at 900p and fidelity mode clocks in at 1440p. Then it uses FSR to upscale to 4K by the sounds of it. Now for the graphical settings, Alex actually did a PC-focused Starfield video where he listed the console equivalent settings, and they're on the screen right now. And that's what we're gonna try to use and see what we can play around with. So let's dive in. Okay, let's take a look at the settings real quick. I made some changes actually. I changed all the low settings to medium because the game is actually quite demanding, but we're targeting 4K. I've set the render resolution scale to 67%. So we're upscaling from 1440p to 4K using the latest FSR3. Now, remember that on Xbox, they're actually upscaling from 900p for their 60 FPS mode, right? So we're at a massive advantage from a visual perspective. Well, this is the very first time I'm running the game on this computer. Actually, I put about 120, 130 hours in this game. I kind of gave up on it, but I had a good time. It's actually a good game, guys. I know it gets a lot of hate, and the NPCs do look can look kind of scary sometimes, but overall, like, the graphics in it are gorgeous in this game, and the lighting alone is fantastic. I really do like it. But we're inside a building. Obviously it's not as demanding inside. Let's make our way outside and see what happens. So we're in the city of Neon. It's like a very cyberpunky place, and here we seem to be clocked in at 60. We still have a bit of GPU headroom, but we are getting close to being GPU bound. So this game is quite heavy, guys, but we're going to test out a bunch of different areas. So bear with me. I just wanted to quickly check out the main square of Neon City here. And yeah, we pretty much pinned at 60. And I also want to make my way to the club, because I remember the club being kind of heavy once you walk in. But yeah, I mean, it's great. I genuinely do hope this game makes it to PlayStation, because I have a feeling a lot of people would buy it. I know it gets crapped on online, as some games tend to, but it's a pretty good game. I built a couple PCs when this game came out and got a couple codes for the game from graphics card purchases, and gave one to my little brother. And he put in like 220 hours into the game. So it's a pretty good game. It's not as bad as some people make it out to be, and it looks great in my opinion. It's awesome. There, let's check out the Astral Lounge. Place is hopping. It's just a few NPCs.
Have I mentioned that I'm not fond of seafood?
Clubs in Cyberpunk 2077 are way more realistic, I guess, to their setting. But yeah, we care about the performance here. As you guys can see here, we're able to maintain 60 FPS, no problem. So yeah, not bad at all. Anyway, let's check out a few different areas. I want to make my way to Atlantis, the big main city, New Atlantis, because that is actually I think it's the most CPU heavy part of the game. So that'll kind of be the real test. So we've made it to the spaceship, guys, out in the spaceport here in Neon City. We're gonna hop on and travel the galaxy with our kind of creepy NPCs. Here we are, guys, in Alpha Centauri in the map, and we're gonna make a jump. So the space area is actually quite easy to run. Look at, we're only using like 50% of our GPU. Very easy to run. Alright, I guess this is going to be the real test here in New Atlantis. I've actually made this run for previous videos I did where I tested a few of my Ryzen CPUs. So I'm gonna do the same. We're gonna make our way to the commercial district here, hop on the tram, and I mean, it's already sticking to 60 FPS. Is this supposed to look like that, or is that a bug? I guess it is. But anyway, we're gonna make our way to the tram, and so far so good. Now I do recall in the commercial part of the city, there is a spot that always, I think it's like a loading spot. There's always a little stutter there, but it already runs way better than it used to. I have tested this game when it came out on this very same CPU, and it's definitely way better. Way better now. So Bethesda have optimized the game quite a lot. I know Bethesda gets crapped on, but you know what? Other developers, AAA developers, do this very same thing. I recently looked at Dragon's Dogma 2, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. They both got huge patches that improved CPU utilization. So, and Bethesda actually updated it only a few months after the game released, actually. But yeah, as you can see here, this is that spot I was talking about. There was a little bit of a hiccup. I think it's a loading area. But yeah, I mean, it's sticking to 60. That's it. Yeah. Oh no, maybe it's this area. Yeah, it's right underneath the hotel. That's what it is. So yeah, you're probably gonna run into a couple areas like that, but it's holding to 60, guys. Pretty good. And again, it looks great. I'm sitting pretty close to my big 4K OLED TV. It looks really nice. But I want to check out a few planets. You know, I want to check out a planet with a lot of trees and frozen planets. Let's check it out. And here we go, guys. We're actually in the same planet as the city of New Atlantis, but we're out into the wilderness, and we're stuck at 60 for the most part. There are a couple times where the frame rate will drop a little bit, but it's not really noticeable. I would say it's mostly at 60, so that's pretty good. Yeah, a lot of detail here. The global illumination in this game is fantastic. It looks very nice. It's not ray traced, but it's a very similar method. Yeah, I mean, you know what's crazy is that if this game did come to PlayStation, the PS5 Pro would probably be the best way to play it on console. That's kind of funny. But I guess to wrap up my thoughts, because this video's gone way too long. I don't usually like to make long videos like this personally. I like to keep them around 10 minutes or 15 at the most. Now, interesting thing is, I recorded footage from 2 more games. A Plague Tale, which I saw really nice improvements, and also Star Wars Outlaws. But this video would be way too long if I put those in as well. I suppose I could make a part 2 if people have any interest. But to wrap up my thoughts about all this, I mean, again, this is theoretical, and it could be that this hardware is a bit faster than the PS5 Pro's rasterized performance. It very well could be, but it should be pretty close, right? If we look at the specs, the performance gain claims that have been made, I think this is fairly close. And I think it gives us a good idea of the type of improvements that can be made with the bigger PlayStation 5 Pro GPU over the base PlayStation 5. I think there's quite a lot of benefits to be had there. You know, I'm not saying that you're gonna go from games that are locked at 30 and now you have a 60 FPS mode, but games where it's struggling to maintain 60 or it drops to the 40s, you could have a 60 FPS mode when GPU limited. But I guess time will tell, and I can't wait to see people benchmark the PlayStation 5 Pro to see exactly what it's capable of. I'm very curious about PSSR, absolutely. I can't wait to see the quality of that technology and how that improves. And of course the ray tracing performance. I'm a big ray tracing fan. So I don't know, what do you guys think about all this? Leave a comment down below, let me know. Give the video a like if you liked it. Took me a few days to put this one together. And consider subscribing if you enjoy my content. This is a mostly PC focused channel, but I am a gamer. I don't have grudges against consoles or anything. I have a lot of consoles myself. So anyway, hope you guys like this, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.